crucial states in the race for the White House.
Every vote must be counted. No one's going to take our democracy away from us. Not now, not ever.
While Donald Trump clings on, launching legal bids to stop the tally. The government hedges its coronavirus bets, injecting $1.5 billion into 2 more potential vaccines. And a new venue for Sydney's gay and lesbian Mardi Gras as the parade marches on to the SCG. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Kirsten Aiken. Joe Biden is inching closer to taking the White House, and for Donald Trump, the path to victory is narrowing. It's 11 p.m. Eastern Time in the US. These are live pictures coming to us from Atlanta, Georgia, where vote counting is continuing well into the evening. Georgia has emerged as a new focus point in what's been a knife-edge election. Nevada and Arizona could also help to decide the presidency. Several key battleground states have fallen in Joe Biden's favour, but he isn't declaring he's won just yet. Let's take a look now at the count with Casey Briggs, and good afternoon to you, Casey. It is, of course, late in the night in the United States, but one county in Georgia is still attracting a lot of attention right now.
Yeah, that's right, Kirsten. 29 hours since we started getting figures in this election race to the White House. There's only a few states really left in play. There are 5. Alaska, I think, is still expected to go to the Republicans. It's just that we have a very early count there, and there's a lot of the count still to come in, so it's a bit early to call. But 4 mainland states are where we're looking, and Georgia's got a lot of focus. Those pictures we're looking at in Atlanta are such a focus because it's one of the few places we're actually getting votes being counted at the moment. There is a particularly critical county in Georgia called Fulton County. It's basically in Atlanta. It is a part of the state that votes heavily for Joe Biden, and the count in that county is expected to be wrapped up somewhere between midnight and 3 a.m. local time. That works out for us in Australia as being between 4 and 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, and so we might get a bit of a clearer idea about where this race is at, which is sort of viewed as a bit of a toss-up at the moment for those 16 electoral votes. You can see we are really nearing the end of the count here. Only 2% of the total votes we think that exist are left outstanding, and Joe Biden is on 49.1% to Donald Trump's 49.7, so 0.6 percentage points, and on a sort of raw vote total, not all that many. This one will end up being tight. We think that the Fulton County results, when they do come in, will then narrow this. We just don't quite know by exactly how much, and that's the big question. There are other ballots outside that county, but that is sort of the biggest pot of remaining votes in the state. So that's why Georgia is of such interest, because there are 16 electoral college votes there, and it could well be that they're the 16 that put Joe Biden over the line to get him the residency in the White House come January. The other state where we are seeing some updates today is in Pennsylvania, where we've got about 11% of the vote left on these estimates from the Associated Press. This has been narrowing all day. It's slowed down a little bit. We haven't had updates very often in the last couple of hours. It is, again, late in the US, and I don't know exactly what the situation is with counting at the moment, but this gap has been narrowing for the last 24 hours, basically, 48.1% to 50.7%. Pennsylvania, maybe, if we're just, a lot of Australians probably watching just wondering when we will have a result, not just who the winner will be, but when we have a result. Well, if Joe Biden is the victor, I think the result will come quicker than if Donald Trump is the victor, because Joe Biden needs a lot less to go right for him at this point than Donald Trump does. And if Joe Biden does emerge victorious, it could be either Pennsylvania or Georgia. Potentially Pennsylvania will be the quicker one, the quickest path to victory.
But when we're talking about time, Casey, are you saying we may know the resolution of those states in the next 24 hours or so?
Look, maybe. I don't know, that's a very unsatisfying answer. Nevada has been counting but is not reporting figures at the moment. Thursday at noon local time, which is about 4 in the morning for us, they'll give us another update. Maybe that'll be enough to call the race. Pennsylvania has been counting fairly steadily through the day and may well have a big update that allows it to happen. You know, it could well be in the next 24 hours if that race or that race particularly are convincing. Georgia, we may well be in sort of recount territory if the race remains very, very close. North Carolina, I don't think we'll know the result there for a little while, but at the moment Donald Trump would be favoured to pick that seat up. And there is still a bit of Democratic anxiety around the seat of Arizona and hopes for the Trump campaign around Arizona, which has been called by two networks, the Associated Press and Fox News. Hasn't been called by all networks. There are more votes coming in at the moment that are tightening that race, perhaps not tightening it quite enough to overturn the lead that Joe Biden has. But if Donald Trump were to chart a path to the White House with the map that he's got in front of him right now, having Arizona not go to Joe Biden would be a very useful thing for him because he's running out of pathways without it.
Okay, now, so just in summary, the main states to watch right now, are they also the ones where the Trump campaign has lodged various lawsuits?
They are. So there's a lawsuit in Pennsylvania, there's a lawsuit in Georgia, there's a lawsuit in Michigan, and there's a request for a recount in Wisconsin. So these two states were called. There's a consensus amongst the US media that Joe Biden has won, and there's not really any fancy projections happening there. It's just that the count's basically finished, and Joe Biden's ahead by more than the number of votes that are left. So that they're called for that reason. They have apparent winners for that reason, but that one is on a relatively, all things considered, tight margin of 20,000 votes or so, but recounts don't often overturn leads that big. It's pretty rare. Michigan, there are court challenges, as I said, in Pennsylvania and in Georgia, where there's a challenge over 53 ballots that the Republicans allege arrived late but have been counted. So I guess the onus will be on them. They'll have to try and prove that there's a systematic issue in the count there. And these issues can get litigated through the courts for some time, and that could tie up in a close race like Georgia. That could really slow things down. So in terms of timeline, I think it's unsatisfying for many people watching, but we've seen that patience can be a virtue here. It could be that Nevada and Pennsylvania are resolved relatively soon, and Alaska indeed. It could be that we're waiting on these ones. There's a lot of possibilities from here, but if you were going to choose one of these candidates to be with this map, you'd choose Joe Biden. Okay,
Casey, we will check in with you in just a little while to see if there has been any movement in Georgia, but thank you for now.
Thanks.
Kadia Goba is a political reporter for BuzzFeed News based in Washington, DC, and she joins me now. Thank you so much for hopping up early for us today. Has the Trump campaign been successful in stopping the vote count anywhere?
They have not. What your listeners or watchers need to understand is that it is a process. It's just not something that happens. It usually is something like that would happen after things were certified, after the count was certified. So it just doesn't. To large lawsuits, it just doesn't happen like that. There is a process.
And so why did the president say that's exactly what he wanted to do when he hopped up in the early hours of the morning? And how do you sum up the Trump campaign as it stands right now?
Well, I think it was just pretty much misleading. He was not telling the truth. They've been, I can't even say cautiously optimistic. They've been very optimistic to the point where when there was a lot of data that started coming out about Pennsylvania and that Joe Biden would sustain some of the leads in the states that have been counted, immediately after, the Trump campaign sent out a notification saying that they won Pennsylvania, which is certainly it's just not true. So they've been overly confident, and I'm not really sure where this steam is coming from.
Now, you are a pool reporter in the White House itself. It is the official structure to support the office of the president, yet it is where Donald Trump is based and is continuing to run his campaign from. What is the atmosphere inside that building?
Well, I can only, because of the coronavirus, there's limitations as to how often we can go up there. I'm not scheduled to go to the White House until Sunday, but I can tell you from various pool reports that it has been eerily quiet. I mean, the reports are literally saying absolutely nothing. There's no one going on the record. There's little chatter on social media, Twitter, from reporters about like sources that have said this, but like not named sources. But there's not a lot of movement inside the White House.
And what does that tell you about the feeling among the president and his closest supporters?
I mean, I imagine head down, working extremely hard. I did hear from a source inside who said they were in the war room. So I guess they're planning and just being extremely strategic and careful about well, I can't even say that, but I guess they're head down and focusing on what everyone expects, lawsuits that are going to arise after the election is called.
Having watched the president use the White House in a way that previous leaders have not, do you hold any concerns about whether America's institutions are indeed strong enough to withstand a challenge from a president who is, as we have seen in the past 24 hours, prepared to claim falsely that he has won the election?
I mean, that's an excellent question. Americans are extremely resilient, so all I can say is that I absolutely hope so. But I also want to point to, if Joe Biden does become the president, he has campaigned on getting things back to normal, and this idea that there was a lot of chaos, and he wants to just hone in on that and focus on unity. So I would imagine things would go back to normal. I'm being optimistic.
And so among reporters covering the White House, is there concern about what happens from here, or is there a feeling that actually the Trump campaign had long telegraphed that it was going to carry out legal challenges no matter what happened on the day itself, that there would be an aggressive legal strategy pursued, and that now we just have to wait and see how it all rolls out?
I think there is going to be a series of challenges. And the Trump campaign, I mean, ideally, I think they're fundraising on the concept that they are going to post or launch a series of legal battles. We anticipate this. I'm not sure. If we saw this happen 20 years ago with the Gore and Bush battle, and it took about a month. So hopefully we're not to that point. However, I want to keep in mind things weren't as, there's a little more leverage here for Joe Biden to actually just win the vote outright. Whereas in 2000, it was just a little tighter.
Okay, Kadia Goba from BuzzFeed, great to speak to you. We might check in with you again in coming days.
Sounds good.
Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison says he has great confidence in the US democratic process, but he has steered clear of offering any views on the candidates' approaches to the vote count. Our political reporter Melissa Clark joins me now from Parliament House. And Mel, it's a tense situation in many ways in the United States. How is Scott Morrison responding to Donald Trump's claims of electoral fraud?
Well, what we're seeing is Scott Morrison and other senior figures in the government really look to not speak directly to what we're seeing unfold right at this point in time. So we have both the fairly extraordinary situation of President Donald Trump looking to question the legitimacy of the vote and allegations of fraud. On the other hand, we have the Democratic candidate Joe Biden increasingly looking like he will make the numbers needed in the Electoral College College to claim the presidency. But it's difficult for the federal government to comment on any of this at this point in time. Either of those aspects, when it comes to allegations of fraud around the vote, the government obviously wants to be very careful not to be seen to unduly intervene in internal affairs in America. It's not really the diplomatic way or the diplomatic tradition in these matters, although Australia certainly does need to and make a point of ensuring that it supports democratic processes. But then it's complicated by the fact that the government wants to make sure that whoever is in charge, whatever the likelihood, they can work well with the next president of the United States. So what we've seen is Scott Morrison and Foreign Minister Marise Payne focus, instead of the candidates and what they're doing or their positioning, focus on the democratic institutions of the US. So the vote counting itself, the fact that so many people have gone to the polls, the legal institutions that are in place, and are very much focused on those. So here's Scott Morrison speaking a little earlier, avoiding talking about the candidates, but very much focusing on those democratic institutions.
I have great confidence in the democracy of the United States, and I have great confidence in their institutions. And the thing about great institutions and democracies is they deal with whatever challenges come, just like our own does. And that's why I express confidence. I think, a great democracy, having a great election with the greatest turnout it's ever seen in its history, is actually a demonstration of democracy working.
Scott Morrison speaking about the US election there. He had something else he really wanted to talk about today, the news that the government has secured 2 new vaccine deals. Mel, can you tell us about those?
Yeah, this is the next step in the federal government's efforts to try and ensure that when and if a vaccine becomes available, that Australia has access to it. So we already have 2 deals that are in place, the University of Queensland and University Oxford vaccine candidates. Today they've announced that they've signed up to purchase millions of doses of 2 other vaccines should they become successful. So we're talking in the order of 40 million doses of Novavax and 10 million doses of a Pfizer vaccine. And that one in particular is interesting, the Pfizer one, because it's an mRNA vaccine rather than a protein-based vaccine, which in short is basically a very new and so far untested way of delivering a vaccine where it gets the body to create the protein to fight the virus in question. But the interesting thing to note with these 2 latest vaccine candidates is that Australia is signing this deal to buy the vaccine itself, but not the licence to produce it, which might suggest that they're perhaps not quite as strong a candidates or as easy to manufacture as the University of Oxford and University of Queensland vaccines might be, but nonetheless the government trying to hedge its bets and make sure it has a number of options depending on what might become available and effective as soon as possible.
Melissa Clark in Canberra, thank you. And there'll be plenty more to come on the US presidential election coming up on Afternoon Briefing with Patricia Karvelis right after this bulletin. Among her guests will be former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd. That is at 4 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time here on the ABC News channel. Taking a look at some of the day's other news now, and Victoria has recorded no new coronavirus cases for a 6th consecutive day. Our reporter James Hancock has more from Melbourne.
We'll crack out the donuts. They've been dubbed Double Donut Days, and this is Victoria's 6th in a row. 0 new cases and 0 new deaths. Melbourne's 14-day case average has dropped to 1.4, and there are still 2 cases with an unknown source. Restrictions are set to further ease next week. The Premier, Daniel Andrews, is due to make an announcement on Sunday. Melbourne's 25-kilometre travel limit is expected to be scrapped, along with the so-called Ring of Steel, keeping Melburnians out of regional Victoria. Gyms are also set to reopen. The number of people allowed inside hospitality venues is expected to rise from 20 to 40. The state opposition and some hospitality operators are pushing for higher density limits, particularly for larger venues. But authorities have warned against complacency, saying it's likely there are still undetected cases out there in the community.
The brother of Australian cricketer Usman Khawaja has been jailed for at least 2.5 years for framing a former colleague with a fake terrorism plot. Arslan Khawaja's actions were today labelled by a Sydney judge as unforgivable after the innocent man was jailed for weeks and branded a terrorist. Jamie McKinnell reports.
At the centre of this case against Arsalan Khawaja was his crippling fear of abandonment. He was jealous of his UNSW colleague Mohammed Nizamdeen's friendship with a woman when he set him up in August of 2018. Khawaja stole one of his colleague's notebooks and wrote in it fake terror plots of plans to attack prominent Sydney landmarks and also included the names of politicians. Mr Nizamdeen spent 4 weeks in Goulburn Supermax jail before police realised that the charges against him were baseless, and Khawaja pleaded guilty to a series of charges last year, including perverting the course of justice. New South Wales District Court Judge Robert Webber today handed him a sentence of 4.5 years with a non-parole period of 2.5 years. In sentencing, the judge said Khawaja's actions were unforgivable. He said the incarceration of an innocent man was a serious perversion of the course of justice and that Mr Khawaja must have known that his colleague would be deported or arrested as a result of those actions. Khawaja has previously apologised to the court and he was wiping away tears in the dock today. Outside court, his lawyer reiterated those apologies.
He is truly sorry for what he's done. He's been living with the consequences of his actions every day and he's thankful for the judge for this opportunity for redemption. It was an appropriate outcome today and it's over.
During these sentencing proceedings, the court heard a lot of evidence about Khawaja's mental health history. He's been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, but today the judge didn't accept that that would have deprived him of the ability to see reason in his actions. The court was also told that Mr Nizamdeen, who's returned to Sri Lanka since this ordeal, is no longer able to visit his fiancée because his visa for the United States has been cancelled as a result. With time already served, Khawaja will be eligible for parole in June of next year.
2 people have died in a light plane crash in central western New South Wales. Emergency services were called to a property in Carcourt to reports a plane had disappeared from radar after taking off from Orange Airport yesterday afternoon. The 2 people on board, believed to be a man and a woman, died at the scene. Police have set up a crime scene and are now investigating the circumstances surrounding the crash.
Single-engine, twin-seat plane that had travelled from Bankstown to Orange Airport during the day yesterday, and that plane was piloted by a 26-year-old woman who was under instruction by a 38-year-old pilot. So it was actually a training flight. We've been processing that scene through the night. We've also been liaising with the Air Transport Safety Bureau, and they've dispatched resources from Canberra, and they'll be making their own investigation and assisting us to compile a report for the coroner.
In breaking news, federal police say they've charged a 65-year-old Melbourne man with foreign interference. He is the first person in Australia to be charged with foreign interference under laws passed by the federal parliament in 2018. Police say the man has a relationship with a foreign intelligence agency, but has not specified which country. The man did appear in Melbourne Magistrates Court today. We'll bring you more as we get it. To the day's finance news now with David Chow. And David, no doubt investors are watching the US election count very closely. How is the market going this afternoon?
Well, Kirsten, the market's going very strong today, and the market, if it keeps up this momentum, is on track to finish at a 1-week high. So investors, as you said, are closely watching what happens with the US election, and Joe Biden looks like he's on track to win the presidency. So that would present more certainty for markets, but then markets are also ignoring the uncertainty posed by Donald Trump potentially challenging the result. So they're definitely putting a positive spin on this. Now, interestingly, Sportsbet has paid out early. So 100,000 people placed bets on Joe Biden winning, and Sportsbet has paid out $23 million for those people who bet on Biden. So yeah, they better hope they're right.
Absolutely.
And now moving on to the stock market. So as I said, the market's going very strongly. The ASX 200 and All Ords up about 72 points. So that's up 1.2%. Healthcare and tech are still the best performers, while mining and energy are the weakest sectors. Now, NAB shares have risen sharply, but Ingham's is the best performer by far, up 16%. The chicken company gave a strong trading update and said it might pay a higher dividend. On the flip side, Treasury Wine Estates is one of today's worst performers, down 7%. As for why Australia's biggest wine company saw its share price tank, that's because the Chinese government is thinking of imposing tariffs on Australian wine retrospectively. Treasury Wine says China's alcohol industry group has asked Beijing to bring in these tariffs. Chinese authorities launched an anti-dumping investigation into Australian wine earlier this year amid rising trade tensions between the two nations. At its AGM this morning, Treasury Wine told its shareholders they're preparing for mild to significant wine tariffs, and it will put on ice its plans to split off Penfolds, its most famous brand, into a separate company. Now, NAB shares are doing very well despite its full-year net profit dropping by almost half, down to $2.6 billion. NAB's cash earnings, which it feels is a more accurate measure of its performance, was a little better, but still a weak result, down by a third to $3.7 billion. And that's because NAB set aside an extra billion to cover potential bad debts due to the uncertainty of the COVID recession. Its result was also affected by lower interest rates and hundreds of millions in compensation to customers relating to past financial scandals. Investors will get a final dividend of 30 cents, which is much lower than last year's 83 cents a share. Now let's compare how all the banks performed now that all their results are out. NAB's annual results were definitely not the worst. That honour goes to Westpac, its profit down by 2/3. It was heavily weighed down by $1.3 billion worth of money laundering fines. Now ANZ, it earned 40% less than it did in the previous year. But Commonwealth Bank's statutory profit went up 12% because it was inflated by the sale of its businesses like Colonial First State. But when you take that away, its cash profit actually fell 11%. And now about those final dividends, CBA paid the most at 98 cents a share, while all the others paid about 30 cents per share each. Now, taking a look at Asia markets, New Zealand was up 0.5%, and Tokyo's Nikkei is the best performer, up about 1.5%. Now, US markets went gangbusters this morning. In particular, the Nasdaq jumped almost 4% thanks to a surge in Apple, Microsoft, Facebook and Amazon stocks. US investors are betting Democrats are unlikely to take control of the Senate, which means it'll be tougher for them to raise corporate taxes and increase regulation in the tech industry. Now, gold is slightly higher at $1,907 an ounce, while oil prices surged overnight, with West Texas crude at about $39 per barrel. The Australian dollar had a volatile week, but right now it's pretty steady at 71.7 US cents. And Kirsten, that's the latest in finance.
Thanks, David. Now, while recent policy changes are helping more Australians to get home from overseas, many continue to be locked out by tougher than usual border restrictions during the pandemic. Temporary visa holders have to get a special exemption to enter the country, even if they were living here previously. It's a situation with no end in sight that is causing distress to hundreds of people.
They talk on the phone, but it's not enough. 29-year-old Asma Mookie is living alone in Darwin while her husband is stuck in India.
This 8 months are really struggling.
Asma had migrated to Australia to be with her husband last year, but now he's been stuck in India since visiting family in March. The day before he was due to fly home, Australia's border closed to non-citizens.
He already have return tickets. It's by Saturday, and then suddenly Friday the border will close down.
Living in a new country alone, Asma's had to seek medical treatment for anxiety and depression. But in order for her husband to re-enter Australia, his travel needs to be approved.
They are not giving us exemption just because of we are temporary resident. We are not PR resident. That's why.
He's been knocked back 11 times.
I just want him back.
Australian Border Force says it's received over 155,000 travel exemption applications, with just over 25,000 approved and each considered on its own merit. It says resuming international travel will be a gradual process, and the primary concern is the health and safety of Australians.
Please understand our situation, what we are suffering here. I know your decisions are everything is good for Australian residents and people, but thinking something about us.
Kate Ashton, ABC News.
Sydney's Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras Parade will go ahead in 2021 at the Sydney Cricket Ground. A capacity of 23,000 spectators will be seated to ensure the safety of participants and the community. Tickets will go on sale next Monday. Organisers say the parade will move away from large floats to focus on outlandish costumes, puppetry and props.
Mardi Gras is more than a parade and a party. Mardi Gras is the hub that brings LGBTQI people and groups and other partners together to celebrate, share experiences and support each other. And now you'll see more from us in 2021 as we work year-round to bring people together and continue our mission of promoting diversity, inclusion, equality and social justice.
You can keep up to date at news.abc.net.au and on iView. Here are the top stories on ABC News. Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden has called for democracy to prevail in the US election. As ballots continue to be tallied, Mr. Biden remains ahead of his rival, Donald Trump, in Nevada, and only needs one more state to clinch the presidency after flipping Wisconsin and Michigan today. The Democratic hopeful has 264 electoral college votes, with the result in 5 states still to be declared. Donald Trump's campaign team has filed lawsuits in Michigan and Georgia to put a temporary halt to vote counting, laying the groundwork for contesting the outcome in undecided states. He's also seeking to intervene in a Pennsylvania case on whether ballots received up to 3 days after the election can be tallied. The Australian government is hedging its bets with a $1.5 billion investment in 2 potential COVID-19 vaccines, one of which is based on technology that has never before been produced on a global scale. Both candidates are in stage 3 clinical trials, with supplies to begin arriving early next year if proven safe and effective. And next year's Sydney's Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras will go ahead, but at the Sydney Cricket Ground. Capacity of 23,000 spectators will be seated to ensure the safety of participants and the community. Organisers say the parade will move away from large floats to focus on outlandish costumes, puppetry and props. Both sides of Australian politics have today expressed confidence in the United States' democratic processes. The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, and Labor's leader, Anthony Albanese, have reinforced the strength of Australia's relationship with the US and called for patience ahead of the US election result being declared. Mr Albanese has also stressed that it's critical all votes are counted.
In a democracy, it's always based on one vote, one value. Every person having their vote counted. And it's absolutely critical that the counts are allowed to continue so that everyone's view can be tabulated and it can be determined who the next President of the United States will serve for the next 4 years. Labor, of course, will work with whoever the American people elect. We also understand that American institutions are so important for our democracy. Australians will be somewhat concerned, I think, at some of the footage, for example, outside Detroit, Michigan, outside a count, of people shouting in a chant, "Stop the count." That's really shouting, "Stop democracy." And we need all of us who hold democratic values around the world need to be prepared to speak up for democracy.
Well, the great thing about the United States, it is a great democracy, and it does have great institutions. And we have a deep and wide relationship with the United States, which is incredibly important to Australia. We are both like-minded and like in so many ways. Our values, our partnerships, economic, security, and in so many ways. And I have great confidence in the democracy of the United States. And I have great confidence in their institutions. And the thing about great institutions and democracies is they deal with whatever challenges come, just like our own does. And that's why I express confidence. I think, a great democracy, having a great election with the greatest turnout it's ever seen in its history, is actually a demonstration of democracy working.
Let's take another look at the state of play in the US election now with Casey Briggs and Planet America's Chaz Licciardello. Hello to you, Chaz.
Hello.
I'm going to spin around and say good afternoon again to Casey. Not so long ago, we were talking about Georgia, still counting late in the evening. Can you update us on the state of play?
And I've got the bigger screen because I was sick of using the small one, so we've upgraded. What we're looking at really in the state of Georgia, one of the key states is, I've been talking about Fulton County a lot. That's here. We're talking about the city of Atlanta, where there's, that is where the bulk of the remaining vote in Georgia is yet to come in. At the moment, it is at a 0.6% gap, a very narrow margin. And if I just show you Fulton, just to show you the results there, this is why the Democrats are hopeful. 72.4% of the vote in Fulton County is breaking for Joe Biden, and that's why they're hopeful that that margin can be run down. It's the same in other counties nearby. We've got DeKalb County, where Biden's winning 83% of the vote. We've got Cobb County, where he's winning 56.3% of the vote. Those sort of suburbs of Atlanta, that's what's making this a toss-up. It's putting this state in play in a way that perhaps many, given that other states that you might have expected would be in play before Georgia have gone to Donald Trump. Really, this is the toss-up of this election race. So this one, if Joe Biden wins Georgia, he's home and hosed pretty well. Also, if he wins Pennsylvania, he's home and hosed. That actually might be the quicker one to resolve, because what's happening here is that Donald Trump, this gap has just been shrinking through the course of the day. It was 50.8% not all that long ago, and it's shrunk again. And as that gap shrinks, if Joe Biden gets ahead of Donald Trump at any point, it's probably the case then that he will win that state, just because those early votes, which is virtually all that's left in Pennsylvania, they're all breaking for Biden in a big way. So really, he just has to get ahead, and then I would have thought he would be the overwhelming favourite in that state, and it's trending in that direction, and it might well be that Pennsylvania is the quickest one. The other two states, North Carolina, we've been saying don't count on a result there anytime soon. Nevada, don't count on a result there particularly quickly either. We will get a hit of results first thing tomorrow morning at about 4 in the morning, but nothing probably today.
So, Chaz, Georgia,
Yeah,
because you've been looking at that. It is moving ever so slowly right now. What are your observations?
Well, first of all, you should just know that we're getting more votes from Georgia between 4 and 7 p.m. today. So that's soon. So, yeah, in the next few hours, that might resolve Georgia.
And what we're getting...
Georgia, the entire state, or just the county where they're...
Fulton County,
yes,
at the very least.
All of Fulton County.
Yeah.
So they're basically the Fulton County County Board of Elections have said they're not going to go home basically until all those votes are in. That's not every single vote in Georgia, but it is a big chunk of them, and you know it could be enough to flip not that the county result, but the statewide result. If Biden's going to get ahead, he will get ahead in Fulton County, and so that's why that's so important.
That's right, and Casey needs to be very careful because he's representing ABC News. I'm representing only myself. I think Biden's going to win Georgia. And I think I agree with Casey about Pennsylvania as well. Things I'm looking for at the moment, Georgia is very important. I'll tell you why Georgia's so important. Because I'm looking at the court cases that are coming up, and they're definitely coming up. Pennsylvania and Nevada are the two states where Trump has the strongest case, which I can go into if you care, but I'll just tell you, he's only got a case in those two states.
Well, briefly, what are his cases?
I will tell you his case, but just to finish off the point I'm making, if Biden gets Georgia, he has enough votes that he doesn't rely on Pennsylvania or Nevada. So that's why Georgia's important. Now, what the basic court case that's reasonable, as opposed to everything else that you're going to hear about, is that in those two states, Pennsylvania and Nevada, they not only accept ballots after the election date that were mailed before the election date, but they accept ballots that aren't postmarked. Now, you might go, well, how's that possible? A lot of election mail is sent by business class mail in America. That's not postmarked. Now, they're aware of that problem. They've been trying to tell people in the post offices to postmark election mail. They don't always do that. During the primary, they screwed it up constantly. So there will probably be some ballots that aren't postmarked that were sent beforehand that arrived after.
But not enough to make a real difference.
Well, let's see how close it is.
Okay.
Let's see how close Pennsylvania and Nevada are. But I'm saying that those court cases are irrelevant if Biden wins Georgia.
Okay. Casey, do you want to take us through the Rust Belt states and see how that's looking right now?
Yeah, we should, because Michigan, Wisconsin have obviously been called by all of the US networks at this point, and I've been saying all day there's no fancy modelling there. It is just the fact that all the votes have been counted, and the margin is such that Joe Biden can't be brought through. But I want to quickly have a quick look. So that's, what is that, a 0.67% margin or so. The polls in Wisconsin were looking at quite a bit of a bigger margin. Similar situation in Michigan. We've got, what, a 2.5% margin. The polls were predicting something quite a bit bigger. We're yet to get the figures in Pennsylvania. That's not Pennsylvania. Let's go to Pennsylvania. And it's a bit of a smaller screen than yesterday. We're yet to get final figures in Pennsylvania. This is going to change regardless of what the result is. I suspect, Biden is on track to win Pennsylvania fairly comfortably, but I don't think you're going to see any US network calling it while Biden is behind, but I suspect he will close that gap. Has there been, we saw there was a polling error yesterday in Florida. Has that become a national polling error that's not just seen in Florida but also in some of the Rust Belt states? Will be very interesting to dissect when we do get some sort of numbers we can say are close to final.
And so, Chaz, in terms of the people that have come back to the Democratic campaign here, are they Hillary's deplorables?
When you look at the demographics, and we need to be careful because there wasn't standard exit polling like we normally have, and so this is going to be debated for probably months. They're going to do some proper studies down the track. But on the first figures we have, I would say that generally, yes, Joe Biden won over a sizable margin of non-college educated whites, who you just referred to as the deplorables according to Hillary Clinton. So yes, I would say that Joe Biden did do the job he was assigned. Having said that, you can see how close the election is. It's more complicated than that. But I just want to say about polls, just very, very quickly. Casey already hinted at it. We're not going to know the popular vote margin for a long time because California takes 17 days to collect ballots after the election, and California just changes the numbers completely. But at the moment, the popular vote margin is, about 2%. The polls before were 8%. So there's a bit to catch up there. They might. But at the very least, this is what we know. Michigan, the margin's about 2%. Wisconsin, the margin's about 1%. Both of them were predicted to be between 8 and 9% margins. I know the, inverted commas, right person won those states, according to the pollsters. That doesn't matter. When you've got a margin of 7 or 8 points of error, you've got a problem with polling. And this is 2 elections in a row. We will be talking about that again, I suspect.
Okay. Now, Casey, you were speaking about Georgia and how we're getting the count in there, and that the gap between the two candidates is narrowing. That's happening too in Arizona, which we have already said is likely to be in Biden's column. But the gap is narrowing in favour of Donald Trump.
That's right, and Arizona is one of those surprise states that has maybe or seemingly flipped in this election, one of the few that's flipping except outside of the Rust Belt. Arizona is a state that we have put in Joe Biden's column on the basis that Fox News and the Associated Press have both put Arizona there. They did that yesterday. They're very confident they're standing by that. Other networks haven't. There's a bit of consternation around that in the United States about whether they've moved too soon, and we're expecting, and we've started getting some more votes from Arizona this afternoon, particularly from, I should say, Maricopa County. So that's the biggest county. It's about 60% of the vote, I think, in Arizona, and it is basically Phoenix, the city of Phoenix. So it's most of the state. If you win Maricopa, you basically win in Arizona. That race is tightening. Whether it's tightening enough to actually change who's winning is unclear. Joe Biden is more likely to win that. You can have debates about whether that should have been called or not, but certainly there are Democrats that are, a bit more nervous about Arizona now than maybe they were yesterday, and certainly Republicans. Well, they know that really, with a map that looks like this, with Donald Trump having to win basically all 5 of the states that are coloured in grey there, it would be a whole lot easier if they had Arizona in their columns. So I think there's a lot of watching there, despite the fact that we do have it in Biden's column at the moment.
On that note, with the Arizona call, the guy from Fox News who made that call is a guy called Anna Mishkin. He is the absolute best in the business. He's the only person, okay, I trust Casey more, but apart from Casey, Mishkin is absolutely brilliant. He's done this before, he's been challenged before, and he's always right. So if he reckons Arizona's going to go to Biden, he wouldn't have made that call unless he had good reason.
Okay, so Chaz, you did speak to us about the pollsters, again, getting it wrong, and that a good hard look is going to have to be directed their way after this. What other thoughts have you got right now?
Look, my major thought at the moment is we're talking about the presidency because it's sexy to talk about Trump, but that's not where it's at. Where it's at is the Senate. And we know a lot more about the Senate than we do about some of these states. We know that Republicans are going to take the Senate. They've got these runoffs coming up, which Democrats have very, very little chance of winning in Georgia. At the moment, they need to win both the runoffs in Georgia to save the Senate. It's not going to happen. So what we're likely to see is a Biden presidency with a Republican Senate in the middle of an economic downturn. What that means is that the Republican Senate can block Biden doing anything. And they will, because there's a political advantage to doing that. Okay, so America is in for hard times. If Biden tries to do things around the Senate through executive actions or through his agencies, he's got a Supreme Court now stacked against him that is going to rule against him. So he is going to be more hamstrung than any president I can remember for decades and decades and decades in the middle of a downturn. I think he's just received a poison chalice, but we'll see.
And if Trump wins? If
Trump wins, then it's business as usual. Like we've seen for the last 4 years. If you like it, then more of the same. If you don't, well, sorry.
Chaz Licciardello and Casey Briggs, thank you.
Thanks.
We can bring you some more on the breaking news we brought you earlier this hour now. Federal police say they've charged a 65-year-old Melbourne man with foreign interference. He is the first person in the country to be charged with foreign interference under laws passed by the Parliament in 2018. Our Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedjets joins me now. Stephen, what other details do we have about this charge?
Well, look, at the moment, details are really, really scant. We only have really the information that's been provided to us by the Federal Police, and that is that a 65-year-old Melbourne man has been arrested and charged with foreign interference, making him the first, as you mentioned, person to be charged with foreign interference since Federal Parliament passed those sweeping changes to the legislation back in 2018. Now, a few more details that the police have provided to us today. They've told us that this was the result of a year-long investigation throughout the greater Melbourne area. They have also told us, perhaps not surprisingly, that they believe that this man is connected to a foreign intelligence agency, but they do not name the country which they believe is responsible. That is conspicuously absent from the release that the police have put out. Aside from that, we know very little. There's also a reference to the fact that the Australian Federal Police who put out the police who put out this release, the fact that they worked with a series of intelligence agencies. We knew that that would be likely under this joint task force that's been put together. But aside from that, we have very little information.
Stephen, talk us through the significance of this arrest.
Over the last few years, we've been told by a raft of agencies, the heads of a raft of intelligence agencies in particular, that the risk of foreign interference has been mounting rapidly. A series of senior public servants as well as politicians say that the threat is greater than at any time since the Cold War. Some have even said that it's greater and more intense now than it was during the height of the Cold War. So that was the reason that the government back in 2018 passed this legislation, which basically creates a whole new raft of offences or ways that you can charge people for foreign interference. The government said at the time, and it's maintained, that these were the tools that it needed to ensure that it could crack down on foreign interference. Now, after that legislation passed, there has been a long, long wait, and a few people, not in the agencies themselves, but in the broader commentariat, if you like, in politics, have been wondering why the silence. If this legislation was so necessary and so urgent, why has no one been charged? Now, the fact fact that there has now been an arrest and someone actually charged does mark a pretty significant milestone. The explanation that we've always received effectively off the record is that these investigations are complicated, that they take an enormous amount of time, that the bar of evidence that you need to gather is really, really high. That's why it's taken so long. But the fact now that an arrest has been made, that someone has been charged under these laws, that marks a pretty significant milestone in Australian political history.
Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jejets, thank you. Now for the sports news of the day, Louise Ransom joins me. Hi Lou, the Wallabies